Americans love scenery. We want to see it all, from one coast to the next, Mount Rushmore down to the Everglades. So hop into a Chevy Malibu and take the scenic route. It's the car you knew America could build. There's a place where people count on friendships they can trace back generations, where they can count on the same stool at the coffee shop waiting for them every morning. This place is called Glen Ellen, and you can find it in every bottle of Glen Ellen wine. This is craft brewed Herman Joseph's, the smoothest, easiest drinking specialty beer in the entire solar system. And I believe you'll find drinkable in the dictionary right after don't order a beer you can't drink. Zoingo! Boingo! The freestyle pogo with more boing, more bounce. Bounce further, bounce higher with Zoingo Boingo. To see what makes Arrowhead Mountain Spring water different from those other waters, you have to go back to the source. And with Arrowhead, that means going back a little farther and longer than most. Between security challenged and security strengthened, there's one important word: how. And it is the how that makes all the difference to our nation and our world. Lockheed Martin. We never forget who we're working for. What makes Kraft Singles so good? 2 out of every 3 kids don't get the recommended amount of calcium. But with Kraft Singles, they get a good source of calcium and the taste they love. Kraft Singles. Magic every single time. Throw boring overboard with a new real meal from Long John Silver's. A meal worthy of a plate, just $4.99. Only at Long John Silver's. We may not all be geniuses, but we can all do something smart. Introducing the Hyundai 199 Sonata Lease. It's a smart deal on a really smart car.
It took me a year to figure out that the correct answer to what's up is what's up. It took a long time, but now I know. If somebody says, what's up, I just say, what's up. It feels wrong, like I feel I'm not answering a question. But they are happy. So I just keep doing it. And it took me even longer than that to finally learn that can I help you actually means go away.
Good morning, it's Wednesday, Apollo Wednesday, September the 24th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have Varney and Company, motivation, meditation, and Apollo. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. Now, Varney and Company.
In company we go. Stu, take it away.
Hi, good morning, Maria. Good morning, everyone. The world is still reeling from President Trump's speech at the UN General Assembly. He delivered what he considers the truth about climate policy. It's a con job. And mass immigration, it's ruining Western Europe. And the UN itself, he says, is increasingly irrelevant. It was a sharp-edged message that must have shocked the assembled dignitaries. They were expecting platitudes. There was nothing sharp about Jay Powell's speech in Rhode Island. He signaled further rate cuts are not guaranteed. There's still an inflation risk. The job market is soft. That's conflicted influences. So, he says, we're cautious. Some selling on Wall Street Tuesday, modest buying this morning. Dow up maybe 80 points, Nasdaq up about 60. Interest rates down a fraction. The yield on the 10-year Treasury, up a fraction, with reverse course, is now up a fraction at 4.14%. That's the 10-year. The 2-year still around 3.5%, 3.59% to be precise. Bitcoin, $113,000 a coin. Gold, well, a series of record highs recently. A little bit of a pullback this morning, down $13 at 38.02. Politics. President Trump reverses course on Russia. He's fed up with Putin's attacks on civilians and Russia's incursions into NATO airspace. Asked if NATO jets should shoot down Russian planes, he said yes. Asked if the U.S. should back up NATO planes in that situation, he said, depends on the circumstance. Kamala Harris keeps digging a hole for her political career. She returned to The View to push her book. A year ago, she couldn't think of anything she would do differently from Biden. That's often considered a key mistake that cost her the election. Now she says it didn't hurt her. She lost because she didn't have enough time. On the show today, we'll show you the benefit of having friends in high places. The president of France, Emmanuel Macron, gets stuck in traffic in New York. He's trying to get to Tuesday's UN meeting. He's stopped by President Trump's motorcade. He pulls out his phone, calls our president. Guess what, he says? I'm stuck because of you. We do not know our president's response. This is just coming into us. ICE confirms that shots were fired into their Dallas facility, striking at least 3 people. The shooter is down from a self-inflicted wound. We'll bring you the latest as we get it. It is Wednesday, September the 24th, 2025. Varney and Company.
And that was Varney and Company, Nonprofit News Now. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is a little bit of Governor Tim Walz, who was the vice presidential running mate, would-be vice presidential running mate of Kamala Harris. And it's about gun control or gun bans.
I guess there was a line in the sand. I was told by Republican leadership that there would never be a vote on guns. There wouldn't be a vote on gun bans. And that's not acceptable reaching a compromise, because I said, provide us what you need to talk about this. I think what's going on now is those legislators are being contacted by the families impacted at Annunciation, and I think those conversations should happen. I don't disagree with the leader that you want to have broader conversation about this, but that's not how this works. The leadership gets together, we lay out parameters, and then we bring in the other legislators. But it's clear to me that Republican legislators want to talk about everything else except guns and healthcare costs and the farm crisis and try and distract from that. So I will express that the talks are ongoing. I remain open to a deal where we can come in and get something done. My only thing was, as I asked for a floor vote on high-capacity magazines and assault weapons, and just let the members vote on it. And if they believe that's a bad idea, which obviously they do, the Republican legislators believe it's a bad idea, then you can simply vote no. And I said, if you want to bring bills forward on mental health, we've done it before and they voted against it, but if they're willing to vote for it now, I'm supportive of that, but we're going to talk about guns.
Okay, so what he's doing here is really subtle in that he is positioning himself as a dictator. He's deciding. You listen to him. He's not acting as a representative, which he is, even though he's in the executive branch. He still represents the people of the state, and he should be talking like a representative instead of talking like a bully or a dictator. this is unacceptable. It's not your decision to make as to what is acceptable or unacceptable, first of all. Now, the problem here for the Republicans, and they're in a losing position right now, whether or not they're going to be a winner, end up winning or losing this battle remains to be seen, but they've set themselves up to lose. And they've done so by putting themselves against the wall, by saying no. There's going to be no vote on. The problem with that is then you are now going to get hammered. You're going to get hammered again and again, hammered in the media, and you're going to be hammered by your constituents calling you up, the left-wing constituents, liberals calling you up and screaming and yelling and jumping, and there's nowhere for you to go. You can't hide. It's like the Texas hailstorm. You can't hide. You can't run from it, and there's nowhere to go. What they should do is remember there's 3 ways to say no. First is say no, and you can do that when you're in charge. When you're in a position where you're completely in charge, then you can say no. Otherwise, you have the other 2, which is say no, then negotiate. No, I'm not going to accept gun control, but I tell you what we will do. We'll go ahead and bring up for a vote a measure that will increase the penalties for gun crimes. You use a gun to commit a crime, you spend the rest of your life in prison with no parole. That's one. The other thing is to say yes with conditions, because really what the governor's looking for here is he wants a gun ban for everybody except him. Everybody except him and his family. Everybody except him, his family, and his friends. Everybody except him, his family, his friends, and his political allies. He's going to want exemptions in that law so that he and his get exempted. So you can say yes with conditions such as, sure, we'll vote for a gun ban, but no exemptions. We will write into the law that there is not, nor will there ever be, any exemptions. Nobody gets a gun. Not the governor, not his family, not his friends, not his political allies, not the police departments. Law enforcement, the weapons of law enforcement will be owned and stored by cities and states. They will have armories. And when a police officer comes on duty, he will go to the armory, check out a weapon, and when he's finished with his shift, he will come back to the armory and hand his weapon, sign his weapon back in, and then go home unarmed. Okay, the left is never going to go for that. The left loves their exemptions, and but that's the way to handle it. Saying no in this particular situation, again, it's just going to get you hammered, more and more and more and more pressure. And this is what they like to do. They like to set up that false dichotomy where you're on our side or you're an asshole. And you don't have to choose that. You can use the Goldilocks option, which is too hot, too cold, just right. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, from an X account, Speaker Mike Johnson, he writes, let's be clear on the Democrat position. Democrats want to shut down the American government, hurting American citizens so that they can give free taxpayer health-funded health care to non-Americans, period. Bad idea in the way he wrote this and approached it. The better way to do it is because the Democrats have cleverly positioned themselves as the pro-government party and been able to describe the Republicans as an anti-government party. So in this particular situation, who's going to be automatically more trustworthy in the eyes of the American people? Democrats, because they're the party of government. So you have to change that. You got to reframe the argument. And you do it this way. You say to the American people that the Republicans are the party of government, and it is the Democrats that are the party of power. and you point to what's happening now where they're holding things hostage and say they are trying to exercise power while we are trying to run the government. That's the way he should have handled that. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, a little bit of motivation.
Success is not a loud event. It's the work you do in the dark, when it's quiet, when nobody's watching, when there's no crowds, no one cheering you on. It's just you working on your craft. And in order to become the best version of you, in order to reach heights you have never reached, you got to put forth as much energy and as much effort as humanly possible.
It's like that quiet walk to the gym, like footsteps. Some empty-ass gym late at night, over and over and over. Whereas I sit there studying other great people and then comparing it with what I'm doing and looking at it. Over and over and over. Doing 20 minutes of quiet meditation a day. Over and over and over. It's a very quiet process. It's not this big rah-rah speech where you do this one thing and something big happens.
We look at the best of the best, and what we think is these people were gifted, and that's the myth that society and the media sells to us. Actually, what made the great ones was what they did every day, their daily routines.
Habits are the building blocks of our lives. Not the goals or the grand schemes or the vision or the big idea. It's what you do every single day that matters more than anything. Just focus on getting the job done every single day, whether you feel like it or not.
What I do is I focus on maybe 1 or 2 or 3 things at a time, and then I just do it. And then I get that done, and then I do the next thing. And then I get that done, and then I do the next thing.
I'm not the strongest. I'm not the fastest. I'm not the smartest. But I will work hard. I will be up when my competitors sleep. I will be up when my enemy is curled up in bed. I will be up getting after it.
You got to get over your mind going, I can't do this, it's too hard and all that. You got to push yourself through when you feel exhausted and say, there's a second wind in me, I'm going to find it. But if you find yourself saying, I can't do something, I don't want to do something, but you know if you made yourself do it, you're going to be a better human being, then you must do it. Don't hesitate, do it immediately. Some people say, well, that's not a very safe life. That's not a very secure life. If you want security, go to prison. If you want freedom, this is how you live.
Average people won't understand you. They don't get it and never will. The sheep will never understand the mentality of winners.
Why are you so antisocial? Because I'm trying to get it. Every time I text you and invite you to go do something fun and cool, you always studying because I'm trying to get it.
If you want to win, folks, you got to stand up and you got to say, I'm so sick and tired of being average and ordinary.
If you make that shift, I'm going to win. We're going to play to win now. We're not playing to play. We're not playing to see how we do. Once you start getting some winning, you start changing. You talk different. You walk different. All of a sudden, this isn't the same damn human being. You can change you. You'd be surprised what a little winning would do. You'd be surprised how good you'd be if you just decide to win. Be number 1 in your office, number 1 in your region.
The winners, they do whatever it takes to get the job done. They do it and do it and do it and do it until the job gets done. If you want to become somebody, do it. If you want to become financially independent, do it. Almost everybody can stay excited for 2 or 3 months. A few people can stay excited for 2 or 3 years. But a winner stay excited forever.
The difference between winning and losing in life and everything, and being a great leader and not, wealthy and not, a big business and not, making a difference and not, is so small. What's the separator? They do exactly what everybody else does and one more. When they make 10 contacts a day in their business, they make the 10, they make one more. They read 1 book a month, they read 1 more. They do 30 minutes on the treadmill, no. They do 30 plus 1 more. They do 10 reps on the bench press, no. 10 reps, 1 more. When you set that standard, your entire life begins to shift and change.
You have to go the extra mile. You have to go is what separates them from everybody else. It's what separates you from where you want to be.
We're tired of this 60% you. We're tired of this complaining you. We're tired of this version. Greatness is in you. You are here. You owe you an explanation. You need to look at yourself in the mirror and say, why are you only giving 50%? What's wrong with you? You here. Leave your doggone mark. So whatever you got to do, you do it. I ain't about to miss this opportunity. I'm about to give everything I got. And I will know if I don't get another gig, it won't have anything to do with the fact that I didn't put everything on the field. I need effort from you. I need you to match whatever effort the enemy is putting up. Whoever your enemy is, match the doggone effort. Every day I feel like driving in a nice car. Every day I feel like flying first class. Every single day of my life, I feel like giving 120. Every single day. I don't have days where I don't feel like it. Why? Because I'm counting on me. My wife counting on me. My son's counting on me. I don't have days to waste because I value myself enough to give 120% or don't do it because I owe it to myself. And can't nobody stop me but me. When you execute, when you sacrifice, there are no limits. Execute, execute, execute. Why? Because when you get results, you get rewards.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of meditation. that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now this is from Mornings with Maria.
In a period of just 7 months, I have ended 7 unendable wars. I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal. What is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. Not only is the UN not solving the problems it should, too often, it's actually creating new problems for us to solve. The best example is the number one political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration. The UN is supposed to stop invasions, not create them and not finance them.
So there you go. And I'm sorry to hear Donald Trump describe the United Nations in such a way, saying that it has potential. It never, ever had any potential. The United Nations is idealistic, and all idealism is about perfection. The idealism of the United Nations seeks a perfect world. But since there is no such thing, the United Nations is simply no more, no less than a waste of time, a waste of space, and a waste of money. And I wish Donald Trump would have recognized that during his speech. And failing that, I hope that he recognizes that fact sometime in the near future. I want to see the United Nations moved out of the United States of America. The rest of the world likes the United Nations, good for you. My suggestion is let's move it to Switzerland. I think that's the perfect place for the headquarters of the United Nations, since most of the tragedies and the violence and the bloodshed happens in Europe anyways. Put it in Zurich, for instance. But again, the United Nations is idealistic. It was never going to work, because it's always looking for perfection. That's why the United Nations always dithers. People are looking for perfection, and they want to get all the stakeholders together, come up with the perfect answer, and they go round and round like a merry-go-round, and they never come up with anything. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, also from Maria Bartiromo, this is a clip of Jimmy Kimmel's, I guess it's monologue from last night.
It was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man. I don't think there's anything funny about it. I posted a message on Instagram on the day he was killed, sending love to his family and asking for compassion, and I meant it, and I still do. Nor was it my intention to blame any specific group for the actions of what it was obviously a deeply disturbed individual. This show is not important. What is important is that we get to live in a country that allows us to have a show like this.
Kellyanne, ABC affiliate.
Okay, so nowhere in there does he apologize. Nowhere in there does he ask for forgiveness. Nowhere in there does he say, I was wrong. Nowhere in there does he promise not to do it again. All he is doing in this little monologue is trying to get away with it. He wants plausible deniability, so that if somebody comes up to him later on and makes a claim about his speech, he can say, no, I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that. So he can avoid culpability. That's what this is all about. It's not there's nothing about it that's self-effacing. There's no sense that he has done some soul searching here and that he has discovered some flaws in himself that he needs to correct. And So it's worthless. His little speech was absolutely worthless. He put in a little bit of that voice inflection. You hear a little bit of the waver, when he's talking. When he said, I posted something on Instagram. Well, why didn't you say it on your show? That's a question for you. You posted on Instagram. Why didn't you double down and say it on your show? I wish Charlie Kirk the best. I wish his family the best. Why didn't you say it on your show? No answer. And again, because this is just eyewash. It's really what it is gaslighting. And I've said it before, we gaslight each other all over the country. Gaslighting is not just from psychopaths or people with severe mental health issues. The left started to pick up gaslighting techniques and decided, hey, this would be a great way to have socio-political influence. It's a great tool, a great weapon in our fight against reality and everything that springs from it. And so this is an example of simple gaslighting. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Jeffrey Mead.
Ref, we just heard from Todd Lyons. He said, hi, we had shots fired into the Dallas ICE office, into the ICE office, specifically into the Sallyport, as you were saying, Griff, area where detainees are brought in. 3 people have been shot and en route to the hospital. Reports are the shooter is down from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Reports are all ICE employees are accounted for, still searching and securing the scene.
Okay, so as of now, we technically do not have enough details to know what the shooter's intent was. Another interesting thing about this is all the people that were hit were detainees. That could be on accident, that could be on purpose, we don't know yet. The most likely outcome would be this is an act of political violence against ICE, and the shooter was trying to disrupt operations and kill detainees in that process, or hit detainees in that process. Let's wait for more details to come out, I'm sure they will. But pay attention to this, because this is what individuals on the left are doing. This is sick. A white male, again, has reportedly opened fire at immigrants at an ICE facility in Dallas, Texas. We certainly have a problem in this country, a disgusting problem. So he's already trying to establish control over the narrative of what has happened. We don't know if he's white. He could be. He very well could be, but we don't know that yet. We don't know that he was shooting at immigrants. We know he was shooting at an ICE facility. But again, think about what he's trying to do. He's trying to set the frame to look like a white man was specifically targeting immigrants who were in an ICE facility or who were being detained. Is that a possibility? Yes. Do we know that? No. Does he seem to care about the truth? No. He seems to care about narrative control. He's trying to put more focus on the skin color of the shooter compared to the fact that an ICE facility was just shot at. Let's think about it. Which one's more important? The fact that an ICE facility was just shot at or the skin color of the shooter? We know it's the fact that an ICE facility was just shot at. And what side of the political spectrum hates ICE? That would be the left. From an optics standpoint.
And that was Jeffrey Mead. Excellent, especially his understanding of framing the argument and how important it is to frame the argument properly. He also used the word immigrant rather than migrant. So his message is consistent. So again, that's _Jeffrey Mead on Instagram. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from a book that's called Good Inside. What's the opposite of understanding? For this argument's sake, it's convincing. Convincing is the attempt to prove a singular reality, to prove that only one thing is true. Convincing is an attempt to be right, and as a result make the other person wrong. It rests on the assumption that there's only one correct viewpoint. And then my question is this supposed to be convincing? Further, convincing has one goal in mind, being right. And here's the unfortunate consequence of being right. The other person feels unseen and unheard, at which point most people become infuriated and combative, because it feels as if the other person does not accept your realness or worth. Feeling unseen and unheard makes connection impossible. Understanding two things are true and convincing one thing is true are diametrically opposed ways of approaching other people, so a powerful first step in any interaction is to notice which mode you're in. When you're in one thing is true mode, you're judgmental of and reactive to someone else's experience because it feels like an assault on your own truth. As a result, you will seek to prove your own point of view, which in turn makes the other person defensive because they need to uphold the realness of their experience. In one thing is true mode, exchanges escalate quickly. Each person thinks they're arguing about the content of the conversation when in fact they're trying to defend that they are a real, worthy person with a real, truthful experience. And again, is this convincing? Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Alice Weidel.
Missbrauch des Bildungssystems als Reparaturbetrieb für falsche Migrationspolitik rächt sich in einem dramatischen Niveauabfall in den Leistungsvergleichen seit 2015. Schulen mit über 90% Migrantenanteil, Klassen, in denen mehrheitlich kein Deutsch mehr gesprochen wird, sind keine Seltenheit mehr. Ja, weil sie ihre Kinder in Privatschulen schicken und die arbeitende Bevölkerung da einfach sich selbst überlassen. Schicken Sie Ihre Kinder in die Schulen, dann wissen Sie auch, was los ist in diesem Land. Missbrauch des
And that was Alice Weidel. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, what does the phrase, if you're explaining you're losing, mean in debates? This was said by Ronald Reagan, speaking of political campaigns. From the perspective of your audience, if you have to explain yourself, you come off looking desperate to convince. As a consequence, you lose the high ground. From a more philosophical perspective, when you have a clear conscience and strong conviction towards the positions you take, your values, truth, and direction, you don't need the opinions or consent of others. As a consequence, you don't need to explain yourself. However, if you yourself are not convinced of the validity and truth of your position, or you can't fully justify your choices, then you continue to expel words in an attempt to create the illusion of certainty. Back in a minute. Thank you. Message to the Democrats. The thing I noticed is that with all the protests and whatnot, is that you, the rank and file Democrats, are the ones that are taking all the risks and suffering all the slings and arrows, if you will, of outrageous fortune. There's a guy today, apparently, that fired on an ICE facility and then committed suicide. There's other people that have the one guy that shot Charlie Kirk. He looks like he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison if he doesn't get the death penalty. And there's other people that are doing similar things. They're firing on police officers. Supposedly, somebody shot an ICE agent in the neck who's survived, but now they're going to end up being in prison for the rest of their lives. You're taking all the risks. You're the ones that are suffering. You're the ones that are getting punished. Your leaders, the ones that are encouraging you to do this, the people on The View, politicians, the people in CNN and MSNBC, and to even a certain extent Jimmy Kimmel, they're still taking limousines to work while you guys are ending up in the sheriff's bus. Does that sound right to you? Sure doesn't sound good to me. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of Bill Maher.
Israel is the Jews' homeland, and Jews have always lived there. You can look it up. It's in this book called the Bible. It says the Jews built a temple with a really big wall 7 centuries before Muhammad or Islam ever existed, and sure as shit, you can still go there and touch it. Calling Jews colonizers in Israel is like calling Native Americans colonizers here. It's ridiculous. To mark the October 7th anniversary, we must launch a campaign to educate young Americans about the Middle East. And the way I'd like to begin that process is by addressing an open letter to Chapel Roan, a great new recording artist who, like a Hezbollah pager, is really blowing up. Chapel, if you think it was repressive growing up queer in the Midwest, try the Mideast. Chapel, did you know that for 2,000 years, Palestine was like an Uber driver with a 3-star rating? Nobody wanted it. And there was never any Arab country called Palestine. Chapel, you're not wrong that oppression is bad, or that Palestinian and many other Muslim populations are oppressed and deserve to be freed. You just have it completely ass backwards as to who is doing the oppressing. Hamas is a terrorist mafia that took over Gaza. These are the oppressors. And when you make it all about Israel, you take the pressure off of them. You enable them. Gender may not be binary, but right and wrong kind of is.
And there you go. Bill Maher. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Stuart Varney's My Take.
Now, that was one of the best speeches ever delivered to a global audience. President Trump at the UN telling the assembled dignitaries, you're wrong about everything. And by the way, this institution is increasingly irrelevant. He told the truth without a teleprompter, which wasn't working. Imagine what would have happened if it had been President Biden at the podium. All right, moving on. Climate change is a con job, he said. Trillions spent to no effect other than to ruin economies. He's right on that. Look at Europe, desperately trying to reverse its green policies. He pulled no punches. Windmills, he said, are so pathetic and so bad. Dead and broken windmills should be ripped down ASAP. Oh, our president doesn't have much time for diplomatic language, does he? He went right at it on immigration. Your countries are being ruined. Your countries are going to hell. That statement was aimed squarely at Western Europe. Countries that cherish freedom are fading fast, he said. The UN is supposed to end invasions, not encourage and finance them. Now, look, we took the show to London last week just in time to see a massive demonstration against mass migration. There are a lot of people over there and over here who think he got it right on this. Big picture. Our president thinks the UN has potential, but is not living up to its potential. It has done nothing about Russia's war on Ukraine, nothing about China's aggression throughout the Pacific, and in Gaza, the UN has consistently supported the hostage takers at Hamas. That has prolonged the fighting. It was refreshing to hear our president speak without the varnish of diplomatic language. American presidents are supposed to address the UN with weak platitudes. We must bring the global community together. We must meet the danger of climate change. Trump has never been and never will be that kind of president. He goes right at it and tells the brutal truth as he sees it. It was the most consequential UN speech made by an American president in the modern era. That's what I think.
And that was Stuart Varney's My Take. And as far as the windmills are concerned, windmills are built by greedy Republicans. They're greedy Republican companies, and those companies should be forced to take those windmills back and figure out how to dispose of them properly. Back in a minute. Thank you, and now, Apollo.
1. Slowly, each of Apollo 6's malfunctions yielded an explanation. The pogo effect had occurred because the natural vibration of the thrust chambers on the F-1 engines, approximately 5.5 hertz, was too close to the structural vibration of the vehicle as a whole, which peaked at about 5.25 hertz. A system of shock absorbers was installed to detune the engine frequencies, in effect, so that they would never again get into sync with the structural frequencies. The pogo did not cause the engine failures, however. The S4B engine failure and the first of the two failures on the S2 stage had both occurred for the identical reason: ruptures in a 6-foot length of stainless steel fuel line, 5/8 of an inch in diameter, that in each stage carried liquid hydrogen to the starter cup of a J2 engine. The line had two short vibration-absorbing bellows sections in it, and the bellows sections had a wire braid shielding on the outside. When the line was tested on the ground, it worked perfectly, but only because, unbeknownst to the engineers, the liquid hydrogen running through the line caused frost to form on the braided shield, helping to dampen the vibration in the bellows. In the vacuum of space, where there was no moisture to form a protective frost, those little old bellows just sang like a rattlesnake, as Jerry Thompson described it. The veteran of the F1 fix was called in on this one, too. They quickly fatigued and failed. The bellows section was eliminated in favor of a new, stronger design. The third of the engines that failed hadn't really failed at all. Through a manufacturing error at the Michaud assembly facility for the S2, two wires connecting engines 2 and 3 in the S2 stage had been crossed. The shutdown of the sick engine 2 had triggered the shutdown of a healthy engine 3. Each of these diagnoses and fixes took many weeks. NASA later calculated that 125 engineers and 400 technicians spent 31,000 man-hours on the pogo problem alone. And no matter how exhaustive the tests, the fact remained that while the flight of the first Saturn V had been splendid, the second one had been a cripple that by all rights should have tumbled into the ocean. Had there been men on board Apollo 6, the crew probably would have aborted the mission during the pogo, when they would have been so violently banged around that they couldn't have operated the spacecraft. If the pogo hadn't happened, Charlesworth probably would have had the crew abort when the two engines on the second stage shut down. It was all right for Wolf to wait and see what happened with an unmanned vehicle, but it would have been dangerous to do so with a crew on board. It was in this context that, shortly thereafter, George Low decided that the next launch of the Saturn V should carry men, that it should carry them, in fact, all the way to the moon. 2. Between flights, the center of gravity at Houston was in Building 2, the 9-story headquarters building at the south end of the complex. The higher the floor, the higher the position. Thus, when George Low became manager of ASPO, taking a demotion from his old position as deputy director of the center, his office shifted from the top floor, the 9th, down to the 7th. Like other senior staff at MSC, Low had a suite. It included a large paneled office with space for a conference table and windows looking out over Clear Lake to the east of MSC. In the reception area were his 3 secretaries, headed by Marilyn Bochting, the secretary with a reputation so stellar that when she died, an annual Marilyn Bochting Award for the top secretary at MSC was instituted in her honor. During the week, the 3 secretaries worked in overlapping shifts, with Judy Wyatt arriving first at about 7:15, a little after Low, and the last of them leaving at 8 in the evening, usually before Low himself went home. On Saturdays, Low worked a shorter day, only until 5 or 6. The secretaries traded off Saturdays. On one spring Saturday in 1968, probably shortly after Apollo 6, though she couldn't recover the exact date, it was Judy Wyatt's turn. Frank Borman, the astronaut who was in charge of the Tiger team that ASPO had sent out to Downey after the fire, was in Houston that weekend and wanted to report to Lowe on the status of the redefined Block 2 command modules that were being produced by North American. Wyatt arranged a half-hour appointment for 9. Borman was in there an unusually long time. When he finally emerged, Lowe called her into the office to take some dictation. Wyatt usually enjoyed taking dictation from Lowe. He was the only man she had ever worked for whose subjects always agreed with his verbs. But this day she was fretting over the mess that Borman had made of the Saturday morning schedule. It wasn't until Lowe was finished that she realized what she had been writing down. The memo was to Chris Kraft. Recent progress at Downey had been faster than they had hoped, Lowe was saying. Borman thought that the command module was about ready to go to the moon. Would Chris Kraft please get together a small group of people and find out very discreetly where they stood on this possibility from a flight operations standpoint, lunar trajectories, mission techniques, and so forth? Lowe told Wyatt not to make a copy even for his own files, and to tell Betsy Benarsic, Kraft's secretary, that this was a 007. Lowe was a James Bond fan, and 007 meant that after Kraft read the memo, his secretary was to destroy it. 3. Owen Maynard had devised the flight schedule for Apollo through the first landing, assigning a letter to each type of mission. A designated the unmanned Saturn V test flights. Apollo 4 and 6 were both A missions, and B was the unmanned test of the LEM, Apollo 5. C, scheduled for the autumn of 1968, was the first manned mission, a repeat of the one Gus Grissom was to have flown. D was the first manned mission using both the command module and the lunar module in low Earth orbit. E was another mission using the command module and LEM in combined operations, but in a high Earth orbit that would take the spacecraft as far as 4,000 miles away from Earth. F was the first mission in which a spacecraft would go to the moon. It would enter lunar orbit and exercise the LEM but not land. G was the first lunar landing. Each mission had its own reason for existence. None could safely be skipped. In the spring of 1968, when Lowe sent his 007 memo to Kraft, he had been thinking of making E mission into a lunar orbit flight instead of a high Earth orbit flight, something that he and Kraft had been discussing off the record for some time. By May 24th, Lowe felt ready to tell Gilruth in his daily Apollo notes that Chris Kraft and I agreed that we would pursue an E prime mission, which would be a lunar orbiting mission. But as early as June, another more radical possibility had occurred to Lowe, which he still kept to himself. At the end of July, he left for a vacation in the Caribbean. On Monday, August 5th, he returned to the office. He came back on Monday morning and things just started popping, Judy Wyatt recalled. He said, "I can't tell you what it is right now, but I want you to keep a log of people I talk to, and I want it kept under a secret cover sheet." Over the next few days, as she kept the log, she began to see a pattern. One morning, she was in the washroom brushing her hair, idly thinking over the people her boss had been seeing, when it hit her. Wyatt dashed back into the suite. "Marilyn, we're going to the moon," she said. Lochting, one of a handful that Lowe had let in on the secret, laughed and said nothing. To George Lowe, the reasoning was simple. Wally Schirra's crew was going to fly the first manned mission, C, known publicly as Apollo 7, in late September or early October. Lowe assumed it would be a success, that the CSM would come out of Apollo 7 certified flight-worthy for a lunar mission. To get to the moon during 1969 and meet the Kennedy deadline, the D mission certifying the flight-worthiness of the LEM had to fly before the end of 1968. But to fly D, they had to have an operational lunar module, and the LEM was running behind schedule. D couldn't possibly fly before the end of the year. None of the subsequent missions could be skipped. Therefore, why not switch the order of the D and E missions? They wouldn't have a LEM by December, but they would have a good CSM and a Saturn V to lift it. They didn't need the lunar module for that first deep space mission. They needed to obtain deep space experience in trans-lunar navigation, lunar orbit, communications, and thermal conditions, and all of that could be gained with a crew in the command module. So, they could fly the E mission without the LEM in 1968, let the D mission slip until early 1969 when the LEM would be ready, and then proceed directly to the F mission. That was the logical half of Lowe's plan. The audacious half was that George Low was proposing to fly to the moon on only the second manned Apollo spacecraft, the first manned Saturn V, and the first Saturn V to fly after the failure-ridden Apollo 6. During the first half of the week after he got back from the Caribbean, Low called Scott Simpkinson, now promoted to ASPO's assistant program manager for flight safety. Could Apollo 8 go to the moon without compromising Simpkinson's safety rules? Looking at the hardware, Simpkinson couldn't see any reason why not. It looked to him as if the real problem was navigation, which wasn't his specialty. Low called Bill Tyndall, whose specialty it was. Tyndall thought the idea was gangbusters. As for navigation, they were in great shape. His mission techniques meetings had already worked through the procedures for launch, Earth orbit, translunar injection, and entry. All they had left were the techniques for mid-course corrections on the way to the moon, lunar orbit insertion, and trans-Earth injection to come home again, and Tyndall told Low those would be a piece of cake. Low talked it over with Chris Kraft. Kraft, who had always been Low's ally in trying to shift E-mission from high Earth orbit to a lunar mission, was receptive. But what Low was asking now for Kraft to get his flight controllers ready for a lunar mission in only 4 months presented a new magnitude of difficulty. Pledging them to secrecy, Kraft met with Jim Stokes and Lynn Dunsythe, his 2 leading experts on the status of the computer software for a lunar mission. If the software couldn't be ready by December, there was no point in proceeding. Stokes and Dunsythe went off to conduct a private inquiry. On Thursday, August 8th, Low flew to Kennedy Space Center for a meeting on work schedules, still saying nothing about his idea. He let Rocco Petrone do his work for him. Rocco Petrone was getting frustrated. At Miller's last program review in Houston, it had sounded to Petrone as if Miller still wanted Petrone to push for a December launch of a spacecraft with a LEM, and Petrone knew it couldn't be done. The LEM just wasn't going to be ready. But so far, he hadn't got the message across. Miller's Apollo program manager, Sam Phillips, was giving him the meeting at the Cape to convince him, and through him, Miller, that December was impossible. Petrone called together his staff and told them to prepare a straight-out briefing. "I don't want any emotion in this thing," Petrone told them, "and I don't want you picking on anybody, because then they always feel you're trying to shove a hot poker up their ass. Just lay it all out for them." So they did, and Phillips listened. "Sam," Petrone concluded, "there's no way that thing is going to launch before the 1st of February. I don't care if you give it to God." Now, senior NASA staff knew that a gap in the existing schedule was inevitable. Low flew back to Houston, confirmed in his determination to send a lemless Apollo 8 to the moon. Early Friday morning, Kraft gave Low another green light. Dunsythe and Stokes had determined that the schedule for the control center software was tight, but it could be met. At 8:45 that morning, August 9th, Low walked from his office up the 2 flights of stairs to Gilruth's office on the 9th floor, and for the first time revealed his plan to the center director. Kraft and Slayton came in and added their endorsements. By temperament a cautious man, Gilruth nonetheless thought this was a great idea. "It took me 10 seconds to respond," he said. Low called Phillips, who was still at the Cape, while Gilruth called von Braun. Phillips was intrigued, but he reserved judgment. He suggested that they convene a meeting of the program's key people to discuss it. In a remarkable demonstration of how rapidly NASA could react in those days, a meeting was arranged for 2:30 that same afternoon in Huntsville. Only 5 hours after anyone outside Houston had heard of the idea, most of NASA's senior officials were gathered in von Braun's office. Sam Phillips and George Haig from OMSF, Kurt Debus and Rocco Petrone from KSC, Eberhard Rees, Lee James, Luddy Richard, and von Braun from Marshall. Representing Houston were Gilruth, Low, Kraft, and Deke Slayton. Low's plan was an easy sell. The initial reaction, Phillips recalled, was guardedly positive. Von Braun promised that the Saturn could be retargeted. "It doesn't matter to the launch vehicle how far we go." Debus promised that the Cape could be ready for a lunar launch by December 20th. The mission would be technically designated C, spoken as C prime. For the time being, the code phrase for it would be Sam's budget exercise. The only 2 NASA officials who didn't express their enthusiasm were Jim Webb and George Miller, and they were 4,000 miles away attending a conference in Vienna, Austria on the peaceful uses of outer space. In fact, nobody told them what was happening. The enthusiastic cabal in von Braun's office decided that there wasn't any point in bothering Webb and Miller with this new idea quite yet, not until they had all had a chance to take a closer look at it.
And that was Apollo. It was chapter 22, sections 1, 2, and 3, from Apollo by Charles Murray and Catherine Bly Cox. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.